Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. With your host, Stu OG Industry Shannon, and Will Warren Davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
Hi guys, welcome to episode 8 of the Wot Supp podcast. Today we have the Guerrilla Chemist on with us, who has been an absolute figurehead in the industry for a good decade now. Minimum, we're behind some massive brands all the way back from Blackstone Labs right through now with Chemix being the most recent project. And today we're lucky enough to have him on to actually pick the brain of the genius behind some of the most innovative supplements we've seen hit the Aussie market in recent years. So we have our usual hosts on, Stu, Shannon.
G'day guys, thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in. Our following has grown rather rapidly over the only few weeks that we've been doing this podcast, and I'm almost sure that that having you on, Brian, will bolster that following even more.
You're welcome.
I like it. We have a humble guest too. Good man. You've done your work to get the following, mate. It's okay. You're allowed to. So I guess I wanted to crack in, mate. What I found really interesting, and you continue to do it now, is that each brand you've sort of played with has always had a very different approach, I guess you'd say, or it's always had very unique and innovative sort of formulas to it. So let's get going right back to Blackstone days. You were the very first person to even think about the concept of something like Glycolog with a GDA. For any listeners, glucose disposal agents, then fast forwarding to things in recent times, seeing intra-workouts that were, very, very different again with like L-Carnitine in intra-workouts wasn't something that people had seen a great deal of. You've always had a little bit different tweaks to your formulas. What do you sort of put it down to? That the sort of, the way you approach things has always been quite new, quite different to the rest of the game, but it's obviously worked for you. So how do you approach things when you're starting your formulations, mate? What's the thought process behind things?
Once I have an idea for a product, the first thing I do is read as many studies as I can on whatever ingredients are in that category. So for Glycolog, I think on this very laptop, I think I have still 30 papers saved from when I was formulating that and reading different ingredients. Some of the studies are from like the 50s and 60s, so they're not new, just nobody used them. There's a lot of things that are common in ingredients that everyone uses, which I don't like personally. I try to find new stuff. One of the things I do that's outside of Chemix and Blackstone and all that stuff is I do patent ingredients, which I'm working on a couple now. So if I could find something that has data that nobody's used that I think works and is experiential, that's what drives me, is finding new stuff. There's so many stuff that's already out there. Some of it works, some of it doesn't, but finding the new stuff, that's what I like doing. So most of my stuff is reading. Like if you were to break down my day of research, it's really just reading papers and see if I can find something cool.
So by the sounds of things, you're almost doing I guess in some ways you're like a meta-analysis bot. You're pulling all these you're pulling all these studies together and that no one's looking at and coming up with your own conclusions, which is very cool. And you mentioned there that there's some compounds that are commonly used, and this is some ground that I think we share, you and I, in that you are not necessarily a big believer in them or feel like they've I guess been used under false I don't know how you would put it, but like, for example, I was reading a post that you put up about beta-alanine, which I found very interesting. I've personally never been a fan of beta-alanine. From the reading that I did on beta-alanine, I guess I concluded that it wouldn't be effective for performance enhancing anyway. And for me personally, just that tingly, itchy feeling is distracting while I'm training. But I was reading you talking about this kind of cumulative effect where we have a saturation level and it only becomes effective once we have hit that saturation point, which, I mean, for the normal consumer could take weeks or even months of consumption.
It's like 179 grams off memory, isn't it? Or somewhere along there.
Yeah.
Yep.
179 grams.
Yep, gotcha. And that'll take most people doing 3 grams a serve. It's very interesting though, because this is a really great point, Stu. And indeed, I think something like you've said before, Brian, actually reading the paperwork more behind it. There's when they say clinical dose on beta alanine, it's very interesting. It's similar to creatine with saturation phase and so on, isn't it? Really, like we sort of, and like with D-aspartic acid had to be 3.2 grams as well, or 3.1 grams. Sorry. It's funny how like the sports industry just takes a little snippet of one study they found, whatever suited them best, and that's gospel. If you don't have 3.2 grams beta alanine, you're no longer the clinical dose. I'm like, well, however you want to get your 179 grams is up to you, mate. If you want to do a tablespoon a day, I don't mind.
But does that frustrate you, Brian, to see that sort of thing just take off and become, like Will said, become gospel? And it's like, where does that begin, and how does it become almost taboo not to put 3.2 grams of beta alanine in your pre-workout?
That's kind of why I took a step into using my chemistry stuff and degrees and experience and digging into the study and see what it actually says. I mean, BCAAs are one of those products, all too, that's been around forever. And somebody took some little snippet from a paper that says increases mTOR. And then all of a sudden from like that, you have builds lean muscle mass, increased protein synthesis, when really it's more prevents muscle breakdown. And if you're not getting enough food, it's really not going to build muscle. But that's for another story. For as far as beta alanine goes, I never liked it, so I wanted to read the paper. Like, is this working the way supplement companies say it's supposed to work? And the study was, what was it, 3.2 grams, I think 4 times a day for 28 days or something. So it was multiple doses of beta alanine to get to that 179 grams. And then only after that point did you get, it was either 20 or 28%, something like that, more carnosine levels, right? Which is the point. You can't take carnosine because the peptide will break down. You can't take histidine. It doesn't work that way. You have to take beta alanine in order to increase carnosine. But it was only maximum, I think, was 28%. And you're taking 179 grams to get to that point. So if you put it in a pre-workout, there's no acute benefit to it. It's really take it anytime during the day, probably in the morning and before you go to bed would be most beneficial. So that way you get more in your system throughout the day. And then when you train, you have some from that morning, from the night before, that kind of thing. I don't know why it's in pre-workouts, other than it's experiential. People feel the tingles and they mentally associate that with it working.
100%. And I think that's a really, really important point that you make is if we have an ingredient that can give us a physiological effect or a physical experience, people believe the product's working. Like I've had some fantastic products or some fantastic pre-workouts even that I just rate highly and would recommend them to anyone. And I'll have a customer bring the tub back to me and say, oh, this one sucked. It doesn't work. I'm like, well, why didn't it? What do you mean it didn't work? I didn't get that tingly feeling in my face. I'm like, okay, well, this product doesn't contain beta alanine. You know, if that's your only measure of whether a pre-workout's working or not, you need to go and buy yourself a tub of beta alanine because you're missing so many of the benefits of this thing.
Isn't it weird? Our industry is, we're both fortunate and cursed in the same stroke in that we make products that are felt products. You know, people have a thermogenic or have a pre-workout, comes with a CNS stimulant load. You know, people feel it straight away. That's what their expectation is of that market space, I suppose. But when you look at some of the things that are most beneficial, it very often isn't the felt part. You know, like no one's going to feel slight lactic buffering. You know, and I guess if you were to look at other parts of the metabolic byproduct, metabolic waste sort of equation, you probably wouldn't necessarily jump straight there either. So it's an interesting ingredient, beta. But the BCAA part, now this is something that's had some contention in the game, and I really want to hear the deep dive on this because when you just recently put out the intro with Chemic's lifestyle there, and that was I'm a massive fan of seeing carbs, let alone cluster dextrin in an intra-workout there with an arrangement of amino acids you don't see often. And very, very middle, and the EAAs, the amino acids you chose were very, very different to normal. So let's go back to some of the early data, because I agree with the idea that we tend to take little snippets and run. And yes, you'll see promising data with leucine or even HMB, its metabolite on mTOR stimulation. I think it's all, if you look further though, it's obviously the bigger picture, right? You've got to also have a minimum of the other essentials to sort of follow that process on further than just literally flicking the mTOR switch. You need to have other amino acid substrate, right? But what was your take on some of the data on say BCAA's efficacy for actually for preventing muscle breakdown in healthy athletic people versus say cancer patients?
Sarcopenia.
Yeah, sarcopenia, and yeah. Like, how does it apply to actually us?
I think if you're eating enough food, you're good. You don't need a BCAA supplement or either like an EAA. I think if you're going to take one of those, EAA supplement, which includes the 3 BCAAs, is optimal, because like you said, your body needs the substrates to build muscle, and like you don't make, they're called essential amino acids because your body doesn't synthesize them naturally, right? So there's 9 of them. You're getting 3 from BCAAs, but the other 6, if you don't get enough of them, then your body's going to pull that from other sources, usually muscle. It'll break down to get them because your body will prioritize enzymes over muscle any day. Something to keep your body alive versus excess muscle tissue that you don't need. So if you're taking an EAA supplement, then you're getting at least all 9 of them. And if you get a good one, like the one that I did for Chemix, I have a very specific ratio that I got from 3 different papers, which includes, I want to say, I don't remember off the top of my head if it was I think it's 1.2 of like phenylalanine, which is not something you hear a lot of, and like 1.7 of 800 milligrams of histidine, 800 of tryptophan, like just large amounts of these things because they're expensive and they're the ones that work. And most people don't use a lot of methionine because it tastes really bad. So if you have anything over like 200 milligrams, you'll probably taste it. I think we use 300 in there, but the ratios are important because if you, like you said, if you turn this mTOR switch on through leucine or even isoleucine, and to a lesser extent HMB, you're starting the factory, but you don't have any of the goods, the bricks, if you will, to build the muscle. Those are the EAAs. You need those. So just by activating mTOR doesn't necessarily mean you're building muscle. And if you're trying to use it for other stuff, your body's going to break down muscle tissue if it needs those essential amino acids. So the first thing is getting food, which things like eggs have great protein, essential amino acid profiles, better than red meat. The vegan sources are very hard to match. A lot of them are lower. You need more of vegan protein sources to get the EAA levels high, but it's doable. You just need probably roughly around almost twice as much of the actual raw material. So I think that if you are somebody who's vegan or somebody who doesn't eat enough food, I think an EAA supplement is beneficial. But I always say food comes first.
Yeah, I'm definitely of the same school of thought there. I have a question for you on that though. If somebody is, and this is something that I guess is another point of contention, if somebody's already supplementing with protein, for example, whey protein, is it then a waste of time to supplement with an EAA or a BCAA supplement? Like, you're already getting protein sources from your diet, like, and for your everyday Joe who's listening to this, I'm just going to rewind right back to grade school on this one and remind people that when we look at a protein molecule, it's essentially a grouping of amino acids that are glued together by peptide bonds. So all these EAAs and BCAAs and stuff like that, they're contained within the protein molecule. So if we're consuming protein and then supplementing with, say, for example, whey protein on top of that, is there actually any need for an amino acid supplement at all, or an EAA or a BCAA at all?
I think I posted the study that showed they compared X amount of grams of whey protein versus X amount of grams of EAAs and with a certain ratio. And I think you'll get more bang if you're using just straight EAAs than whey protein. Whey protein is a whole food, right? So it acts quickly and it's going to get chopped up in different spots, right, from your proteolyses. And if you count that as food, right? So I think that if you're trying to supplement with something, I think an EAA goes straight to the point as far as it starts putting your body into a state of hyperaminoacidemia, which is like when your blood is flooded with amino acids, which is what creates an anabolic environment. So the studies that I compared whey protein to EAAs show that EAAs increased overall muscle protein synthesis. And then that's why I would take EAA over whey. I don't think whey is harmful in any way. I don't think whey protein is harmful to you. I think it's a great source of protein, especially, if you take it around workout time or pre or post. I think if you're trying to really build muscle and you're somebody that is taking as much food as they can and right at workout time, I think is when EAAs are most beneficial. I think that would be better, in my opinion, than just taking a scoop of protein, even though it's more protein overall. It depends on the ratios of what you're taking as far as the EAAs. And they're very specific ratios that your body needs. And a lot of the ones that are out are very underdosed because they're expensive and they're very hard to mask the flavor of.
So you're obviously familiar with this PHR, perfect human ratio, that's being advertised a lot. Do you think that that's on point?
I think there is an optimal ratio. I don't know what are they saying is the perfect human ratio.
Look, it's this very, very
they found it back in
my head. I don't know it, but it's a very specific inclusion rate for each of the 9 essential amino acids, and it's like they call it the PHR, the perfect human ratio.
It was found during a earlier guy. If you're looking for data on it, it's under MAP, the master amino profile. It was found by it was later used anyway by the guy behind ALR who did if you remember that product, Chained Out, bloody forever ago. Human Pro, not Chained Out.
Yeah, I remember Human Pro.
Yeah, for sure, man. So that was one of the OG throwbacks, and that was based around that concept of the master amino acid profile, the MAP. And apparently it was where they, probably similar to what you were doing, where they found the right ratio of the amino acids in respect to each other. But what I've always found really hard to do is when you're looking at each amino acid in a study in isolation, it's almost irrelevant, I've found, when you put, as opposed to a coupling of them. So for example, if you look at isovaline and its impact on blocking with serotonin and so on, but you have tryptophan there, for example, which is a well-known precursor. If you read them separately, you go, these two are counterproductive. You've got but when you put them together in the correct ratios, it obviously sends a different set of sort of cellular signaling. So it's a really hard thing to research, I suppose, even for the punter and so on. Without a background, it's quite difficult to see how they'll work in conjunction versus separately. So when you're looking at putting them together and prioritizing those less seen, like methionine, that's a super interesting inclusion. Again, an afterthought for 90% of the sports market. But again, very, very important with the clearance of metabolic byproducts and so on. So with your sort of bringing that to market and a product that's actually, properly backed with data, but how are people's perceptions of that? Because I guess, both Stu and I, we're formulators. With my brand, I always try and bring things to market that I try to do differently. You often have to try and you're met with some resistance sometimes when you do things that are a little out of the norm, and you're very out of the norm. You bring things that haven't been done yet, like Kana. No one had done Kana before. Like that wasn't even known. And then, boom, you drop it on some spots, and now it's in like 4 or 5 different labels overnight.
Hey, hang on, Will, just on that though. I had used Kana for myself. I'm a big fan. Are you familiar with Patrick Halford at all? There, Brian.
What's his work?
He is he's a molecular biologist as well, and biochemist. And he's a British author. He's written over 30 something books He really specializes in botanical compounds. And he's written an amazing book. I'd highly recommend you have a look at this one. It's called Natural Highs. So his name's Patrick Halford, and he has a book called Natural Highs. And that's one of the that's when I first discovered Kana, was in his book.
Yeah, what were you looking for?
Well,
cheeky.
Well, that's the thing about the book. You know, he explicitly writes on the book that there's some natural and safe alternatives to common party drugs.
Yes.
So he'll show some potential combinations of natural and legal plant extracts that you could replace things such as, you could name any party drug that you wanted, that he'll give you a similar response as far as your chemical response to, I'm not going to go into names. I'm not going to start naming party drugs on here.
But like dropping, you mean like a dopamine release, serotonin
exactly
release,
right.
like
So if we're looking at release of certain neurochemicals and stuff like that. But it's a fantastic book. He goes into all sorts of things from treating anxiety, depression, all sorts of stuff with naturally occurring botanical extracts rather than organ damaging pharmaceuticals.
What that's actually a segue to somewhere I wanted to go actually with this, Brian, was the nootropic space is something that interests us both massively. But there's also, I've been doing a bit more research recently, and I'm sort of at a crossroads on. I've always found anecdotal efficacy is amazing, and a lot of these nootropics. So your alpha GPCs, acetylcholines, a lot of I've had great success with these, and I find a very acute increase in cognition. Some of the data though is sort of showing that it's more of a cumulative than an acute effect is the thought process behind these. And you're someone who's always pioneered very unique and very new nootropics that we haven't seen much of in the sports scene before. So when you're going about nootropic selection and coupling those in pre-workout, say, or thermogenics or what have you, what are your sort of reliable go-tos that have the good data? Because you obviously trawled through enough of it. Here in Australia, alpha GPC is a big one. But again, go to the data. It's only 18% choline. When you look at
right, because it's 50% material.
Yeah,
and then it's only by weight. I think like 20%. Yeah,
which is bizarre that it works so well. Like it's actually our standard, the clinical dose, or what have you, 300 milligrams of alpha GPC. It's like that's what we all look for as the gold standard, and it's so expensive to formulate with. As you know, when you put it into a product, you're looking at several dollars just in a 300 meg serve. Like it's a very expensive product, but it's only it has such a minimal amount of choline, but it does seem to have at the very least an anecdotal improvement in cognition. What's your findings on? What are your favorites in the guys that actually work in the nootropic space? What are your go-tos?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know the background of why Dmae is banned in Australia, but I like that one a lot for a choline precursor. It's cheap and it works really well. Dimethylaminoethanol, right? I don't know why it's banned in Australia.
Oh, because it works.
Yeah, but I mean, it got banned with those stims that obviously were, synthetics and things like that. But choline bitartrate is not the same.
No.
The bioavailability is not the same. I think alpha GPC works well because of its ability to cross the blood-brain barrier because of the phospholipid backbone. I think CDP choline works really well. That's probably my favorite of the choline donors, that and DMAE, which is not a choline donor, but it works well to produce choline and acetylcholine. I think for mental stuff, Kana was something that initially, what's that brand that they used 25 milligrams of it? That was their trademarked brand. They I forgot the name of it. It's like $4,000 a kilo. And I remember getting a sample of it and reading what it was and read the paper on it. And 25 milligrams at $4,000 a kilo, 25 milligrams is not that pricey. But I started looking more into Kana and realizing like where is it native to, and how are they taking it in where it's native. And the dose of Kana was anywhere from 500 mgs to 1500 mgs. So I had a bunch of just the raw powder, which looks like dirt and tastes just like dirt. and and I was messing around. It's real sticky though, very sticky dirt.
Yeah,
so
right.
you can roll it. You can roll it into like a little ball once you weigh it out. So you have like almost a little pellet to swallow instead of just dirt powder. And when I was messing around with the higher doses, there was a very synergistic effect between that and taking one stimulant, say, what's legal over there?
Bugger all.
Besides caffeine.
Yeah.
We used synephrine. Synephrine's still legal there, right?
Love synephrine. Yep.
Yeah. So using any of those, beta-2 agonists with Kana, it helped increase not only the attention span, but the euphoric effect that I think Stu was alluding to earlier when he tried it in his book, is that Kana it's a natural serotonin reuptake inhibitor already. It releases dopamine already naturally. So you're getting those two effects, which your brain loves, those two things. You feel good and you feel warm, and that's why a lot of those synthetic drugs do the same thing. But Kana is natural, and I think that the dose matters, and I think it works really well. It just, when I was messing with it, it just brought my normal formula from here to here, and I didn't expect it.
And that's what nootropics are great for, isn't it? You really do take a good pre-workout and make it great when you do some, and it doesn't have to be the most complicated thing, but just throwing in some dopamine agonists, a bit of, some choline donors. And I guess choline's a really interesting one, because like I'm loving the idea of, some of the studies on the like long-term use of sort of, uracetylcholine's agonists as well. And they're really, really fantastic for mood, memory formation, attention span, prevention of Alzheimer's and dementia, like really, really like just good for every human being, regardless whether it's the sports space. Everyone, right, I think, could benefit from that. But what I couldn't put to bed was the idea behind so with choline in particular, after going so deep into its positive effects, I started looking into sources, and there was obviously the ones that we're used to seeing in terms of isolated compounds, but then nutritionally. And I found what was bizarre was like we said before, a lot of the sports-based ones are actually quite small amounts of the choline. We're talking microdoses compared to, say, egg. A whole egg contains 250 milligrams of choline. But you don't, but if you have a cup of coffee and an egg, you don't feel this, you're not lit like you are when you have a pre-workout. And it makes me wonder, I can't put this to bed. No, the only thing I can think of is the other amino acids at play, because the egg's a very complete amino acid source, obviously.
I'm just picturing right now, like a chess tournament or something, all the guys waiting to play chess, eating these whole boiled eggs now after watching this podcast.
Nuts too, right? Are nuts really high in choline? I believe there are certain nuts that you eat in the morning, and that the fats help absorb the choline. And if you're on, I think that's part of the mental effect of when you do a keto diet too, is you're eating a lot of whole eggs, you're eating a lot of nuts, and that does have higher sources of choline than you're used to. So I think it has to do with availability, how well it's getting into your system. When we make a supplement to go into your body, it may or may not get absorbed as well as the food source. Sometimes it's way worse. Sometimes it's much better. And that's where pharmaceuticals come in, right? The pharmaceutical takes a naturally occurring botanical and then alters it with an atom or a methyl group or whatever type of compound or atom or group it is, to make it more bioavailable, to last longer, something like that. So in the natural realm, we can't do that. So the way to bypass that is, how do you make it absorb better? And so I think that the phospholipid backbones help a lot. I think that the choline that's in eggs, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of it is phospholipids, correct? Yeah,
because of the you've got a pretty healthy. Hopefully, if they're free range too, you've got a really amazing omega-3 to 6 ratio backing that as well. So you've got some other EFAs that go with it, which is really awesome. It's just, but I just found interesting the felt effects of like the acute supplementation versus nutritional. You don't feel quite the same. Or if it's really
I think that there's a lot to be said about the kind of psychosomatic effect of some of these things as well. Sometimes when we're taking something that looks like this, it's like this is pretty cool. Like
placebo's a good 30% of your data, right?
Well, it looks nice. It's got these fancy kind of clinical looking images on it, and so you're going to get a better feel from it than you are from sitting there eating an egg.
True, eggs aren't sexy.
I think I would tend to agree that the placebo effect is, and it's not really a placebo because this is active, but psychosomatic effect is real for sure. And it's like Stu was looking for his legal highs. There was an expectation when he was taking this that they're going to do something, right? So already the bar is there for it to work, whether or not it's those compounds or it's the anticipation, your body releasing its own chemicals because it thinks it's going to get a dopamine release or whatever. That's something different. But I think as far as eating a whole egg versus taking a supplement of choline, I think a large part of it could be, like he said, psychosomatic. If this supplement is going to do so much for me versus I know I've eaten eggs my whole life. And you might just not even notice that effect. That just could be your baseline. I mean, don't eat eggs or any choline for a week, or 2 weeks. Flush it out, and then try eating eggs and see if you feel it. I don't know.
That's a fair point. That's fair.
If you don't have a washout period or something, that could be just your normal baseline of choline.
Because life isn't a perfect science experiment either. It's like when they do studies with like you would have found with the GDA research. A lot of it's done on a bolus of carbohydrate, but not many people in isolation, unless you're having a binge, are having just straight carbohydrate. It's almost always in the presence of a protein or a fat with it,
Right.
And I think with that's very much the case with going to that the sort of supplemental, choline versus the nutritional. And you mentioned there a lot of time we try and work in the sports science space on absorption, but some of the times the whole there's also that flip. I do a lot of work with naturopathy and looking at herbals, and I find that there's also that school of thought in the naturopathic game where they're all about nature knows best and so on, with things like, let's say, curcumin and turmeric, where you might go
KSM's a good one. Are you familiar with the ashwagandha and KSM versus the ashwagandha and sensoril?
Yeah, so with alkaloids it's 5% versus 10%, and it's got a very different.
KSM is the naturally occurring ratio, so it's not just the highest amount of actives in the ashwagandha. It actually is the ratio from the root, where sensoril is just a 10% of the active. So it's like the entourage effect, right? Like a CBD is and THC are a perfect example of the entourage effect. So CBD works really well, but it works better with even a small amount of THC. And there's papers on this and I posted one where if you take a blend of CBD with THC or just in the natural sativa plant versus an extract of CBD, it works better. And they call that the entourage effect, because all the other cofactors that are in there, not just the two actives, but the way they exist in nature with whatever else is actually in that plant, helps with absorption and getting into your system and getting your endocannabinoid receptors to react. It's a very complex thing where if you just take one compound or another, you may not get the same effects. You don't have the same cofactors. You don't have the same things that are in that plant, regardless of if you think they're active or not, that actually do help with absorption and things like that.
Yeah, because that. Sorry, Stu.
Do you think that with we're talking about? Do you feel that like guys like us, we're getting to a fine point with our tastes?
Wait, are you grouping guys like me into guys like you? Is this enough?
You're a different game. You're a different game.
All right. Do you feel that?
Just kidding. Go ahead.
Do you feel that people in the industry, or people who, like, say for example, people who are interested in actively using and seeking out nootropics, say, do you think we're getting to a fine point now where it's kind of like wine connoisseurs, where we're noticing effects from different compounds that your average Joe is never ever going to pick up on. Like, so, you know, you talk about fine wines, you know, and you've got people who test these wines and they say, you know, this one, you know, has this woody after flavor, and you know, this one touches the palate with a softness and all this sort of thing. And you know, here we are chasing these nootropic effects where it's like, you know, that one just gives me this really smooth sustained high, and that one, you know, the onset is really fast, but you know, and all this sort of thing. And at the end of the day, when it comes to the customer, they're taking something and going, I got no idea what you're talking about, you know, I kind of felt good on it. Do you think we're getting to a point where we're getting into too fine a point, or do you think there's no such thing?
I think there's no such thing. As far as for me as a researcher, I think I mean, one paper, you know, leads you down the rabbit hole, right? So if you start looking at one molecule, then that leads you to another one, and then all of a sudden you're like 4 hours later, your eyes are fried because you're reading so many papers, and it's just asking more questions, right? So do most people that buy supplements care as much as you or I, or no? Do I care? Absolutely. Because somewhere in that paper is some unique molecule that is really cool and actually does work versus what's out there. Like they just brought, you know, teacrine was a big thing to the market. Then they brought methylliberine, and then there's more coming out on that end. I don't like teacrine personally. I never felt it. I didn't think it worked well. Some people love it. The data is, you know, there needs to be more. It shows that it can increase caffeine's half-life, and you get a higher level of caffeine, which is good. But is it doing something? Was teacrine the tipping point? Is methylliberine better? Is liberine better? Or like, there's a bunch of other things out there that, without asking
the question,
you know, is there something better, right? Without asking the question, how does this work exactly? Is there something that is similar or better? If you don't ask those questions, you're just complacent, and we don't go anywhere.
Yeah, we stagnate, and it does, and you only tend to see these revolutions in stimulants, like, and I guess there was less of a revolution between teacrine and Dynamine because they literally just methylated it. But again, that's a question. That's a point of absorption as well. Again, isn't it? Like, put a methyl group on there, you know, nearly instantaneous absorption when you have Dynamine. I personally love Dynamine, but found teacrine, again, mixed results. But they don't come up with those things until something gets banned, you find, typically, do they? Hey, you got number 2 in.
I got 3 dogs, yeah.
Well, I got 3. Okay, the third will make a guest appearance shortly. But I guess you're right. I think circling back to to a statement you made before, where there was like pharmaceutical compounds in general, or singular amino acids and so on, tend to have one like mode of action, one mechanism, one on switch, one pathway they'll either inhibit or promote. And one thing I found as a interesting trend in our space. Let's look at things like like going to the alpha GPC game. So boosting acetylcholine. We just spoke about how great that is for memory attenuation, for all the great things around cognition. Then they couple that with huperzine A, which is fantastic again as an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So that's really cool. We're boosting one thing and stopping the breakdown on the other hand. Just like with antidepressants, there's SSRIs and keeping serotonin elevated. But dopamine there's a lot of dopamine agonists in the game, but there's not a lot of things that slow down COMT from clearing that. And I don't know, I guess, is there what's your opinion on the long-term effects of boosting something, and not really working on the feedback loop in that one there? And is there any compounds you've sort of played with that might help balance that a little bit more to help people prolong that euphoric, positive mood, fantastic focus they get when you boost dopamine?
Well, there are natural dopamine reuptake inhibitors that work very similarly to the pharmaceuticals, like amphetamine salts or Adderall and modafinil, stuff like that. I have 2 different ones that I'm patenting at the moment that work as dopamine reuptake inhibitors that have really good data, and if you take them, it's really noticeable. So they're out there. Nobody's come out with them in the mass.
Did any test subjects for those?
Yeah,
send a couple my way.
Yeah, I'll be your first person to put those in the products, mate. I'd love to see what these come out as.
One of them is this bulk powder that I had to get. It only grows in Thailand, and I ordered it and I capped some up. There wasn't a standardization for the active. It was just a bulk powder. But after playing around with a few doses, it's very, very noticeable between like taking one cap versus 2 capsules of the same amount. So I think with the total maybe have been like 500 milligrams or so of the total powder. And it was extremely noticeable, the difference. So sometimes it just depends. Like these things come in small quantities, as we know with DMAA that was found in such a very, very small quantity naturally. But so a lot of times you have to either take a lot of the bulk powder or you try and make a synthetic version, which I believe the court ruled is okay to make a bioidentical synthetic. When the whole DMAA case came down, they made a big stink that you can't find it in the lab and then try and find a plant that it occurs naturally. But if you find it in a plant and it's a small amount, you can upscale it, which is good, I think, for us, because for so long it was, alkaloids can't be synthetic, like ephedrine, if it had to be ephedra or mahuang, where every other compound is purely synthetic. There's no natural anything really anymore. I mean, like your vitamin C isn't coming from oranges or anything. Your caffeine is not coming from any caffeine bean or anything, or cocoa bean. I mean, like very rarely. Most of it, the caffeine anhydrous, is synthesized. So why is that illegal? Because someone said it was. But essentially, it won't be.
It's bizarre, mate. We've even gone further in Australia with things like kava. Kava's a really nice.
Love kava.
Yeah, beautiful, right? Has some really great benefits in a lower dose than the natives play with. But you'll find, like, for example, it's legal in an aqueous extraction of the carbanoids, but that only aqueous. You're like why? Like why? Like how?
We can't use something. Yeah, there's so many effective compounds that we are given no clear reason as to why they've decided to ban them. And sometimes it almost just like our equivalent of the FDA is the TGA, as you're already aware. Sometimes it almost feels like the TGA are just the fun police. And we're given no clear explanation. And there's nothing like, I think the thing that I like about the way that the system works in the US is they are kind of forced to put things in black and white, right? They need to say, all right, well, we're making a specific ban on compounds of this nature. Whereas in Australia, it's just like they can just pick and choose. It's like,
they still pick and choose here. let's not get carried away. Think about like they put out, warning letters all the time. Hygenamine was one. Hordenine was one. They just put out a warning letter. Why though? If you look at the data on these things, they're not dangerous at doses, and I think it is kind of I don't know if this is like conspiracy stuff or whatever you want to call it, but they look and see what brings off what's like a pharmaceutical. What has the same effect as a pharmaceutical that will take away money from big pharma and stuff. Because if you can take a natural supplement that will help you, there's no need to go to the doctor for something anymore. I think that's where a lot of the alkaloids and a lot of the stimulants got banned, just because they work the same way as the prescription stuff. And so the FDA has a funny way of, I think, also picking and choosing what is legal, what is not. And I think delivery system can make it a drug or not. Technically, I think all creams and lotions are considered drugs because of the delivery system. So you can have caffeine in a lotion, but as soon as you put it in that lotion, it's a drug. It's not a supplement.
Yeah.
They don't enforce it that much, but it technically is a drug. So delivery is a big thing.
And delivery is an interesting point with that versus sort of transdermal versus oral bioavailability. Unfortunately, is also really, really preferable in some things. Like Coleus falsoli is a beautiful herb we love playing with, but your gut doesn't love it as much as we do at higher doses. So transdermally, you've got a really great way of getting massive doses into the system to get that cyclic AMP stimulation, and you've got really positive effects on TSH and on for thyroid function and even testosterone in some data as well. But again, sometimes that technology, like having a different delivery system, is what could make something that might otherwise cause a consumer discomfort sort of, actually give them the benefits without the drawbacks. But again, the sort of deliveries where, unfortunately, the details are in the crumbs with that one, sadly. But and it's what here we're playing with them still. We've got some products that are transdermal, but it never really had a chance to take off here in Oz. But
people don't like them for some reason, unless you're educated on why it's a transdermal, and you're willing to put this thing that could be uncomfortable on you. People just want to take a pill. It all comes down to the easiest route, right? You're 100% correct with transdermal delivery for things that are extremely hydrophobic, right? So if they don't go into water, how are you going to get them into your system? Orally doesn't really work well. So you can do transdermal, and it will effectively bring it into your system much more at higher levels, like you're talking about with Coleus, because Coleus is a good example of that. But most people don't even want to rub this lotion on. So those products, I've never seen them even the ones that claim to like burn fat at that area, they never really take off. I think it's just we've been accustomed as a society that's not, you don't take drugs that way. You take them in a pill. So why would I want to rub a lotion on me? I don't know. That's my opinion. That's
a really interesting thing. And so we're not often lucky enough to have someone with your level of academia behind you. So I want to ask, we look at the systemic versus localized effects question right now. Like you said, I think we're all old enough to understand that spot reduction is a myth, right? But I'm talking more like what we just said then. If you were to take a given example, like let's use that. Let's use transdermal on on the road. Sorry, mate.
Okay.
Yeah. So will you?
I think you're Indian, but it's a good one for.
Yeah, that's actually probably a better one, to be honest. But what I'm sort of thinking is, does a specific absorption location sort of work in a regional way, or is it again systemic? Because once it enters bloodstream, it's systemic anyway. The effects, like, can you with compounds, can you have are they site specific per se? Is that something that can actually be done? My thought process would be anything in the bloodstream is systemic as a whole. So you can't have those fat loss creams and so on. We've seen that whole idea I don't think can work. But what's the chemistry behind it?
I think for the most part, everything is systemic. Once it gets into your system, there's no way to localize something other than, like a lidocaine. You can physically feel it in a certain spot. It doesn't really have a systemic effect. And so it really depends on where you have the most of those receptors for the drug. If they are somewhere like say yohimbine, which burns fat via like alpha-2 receptors, right? So you have a lot of alpha-2 here and in your legs. Is it possible that it would go there first and then have systemic route? So are you maybe hitting those receptors briefly and for some X period of time before it goes systemic? Maybe. But I think for the most part, everything, like I would agree with you that once it gets into your system, it gets in your blood obviously goes everywhere. So like even I've known bodybuilders that compete that have used synthetics with like DMSO and creams on them, so they don't have to inject or take an oral. It's not like they're growing muscles specifically where they're putting this on. It's a systemic thing. So I think the only thing that would differentiate that is if you had a lot of a receptor at that one spot, then maybe for a brief period of time it could get in there first and react. But I haven't seen like a paper on that. I don't even know if they even study stuff like that. I haven't seen anything. It'd be interesting to find out.
Probably just us, I'd say. And I guess there's a lot of things that we're interested in.
Questions.
And I guess one thing that we all study a lot lately is, and neither Stu and I are massive massive stim heads for this reason. I've become very big on the adrenal space in the last little while, and massive on the effects of cortisol and its deleterious effects on everything from body comp to cognition right through to everything essentially. Now you've interestingly been work on that product, Quarter Block, I believe was the name, where you were playing with it recently. You sort of engineer that very differently, and I'd love to hear your perspective, because most of the time the Aussie market today, where we're up to, is about as advanced as we're getting. Is we're playing with looking at I just put one out recently, adrenal support product. I went for sort of I try to go a bit more broad scope, so go gut-based inflammation, oxidative stress as well with resveratrols and NRF2 activation, curcumin, all that sort of jazz. But you went the step behind, I guess. So we're all looking at the active and you sort of went before the conversion. So where was, because that's, again, a very interesting way of approaching it. Like, we're all sort of trying to mop up the damage once it's already been released. You know, you sort of went to, oh, what if we didn't have as much active corticosteroid in there? Like, it was really, really a different way of looking at it. So yeah, walk us through your approach to adrenal support.
Okay. You guys know Patrick Arnold is, right? The chemist, right? He was a big influence on why I wanted to go back to school and get my degree in chemistry and be a chemist. He wrote an article years and years and years ago about an androgen that was an 11-oxo compound that was a specific to blocking the conversion of cortisone into cortisol, and it worked well. They sold it for a while over the counter, and then it got banned. It's terrible bioavailability, right? And so I was saying that article stuck in my head for years. And so ever since Blackstone, I was sitting on this idea of is there a natural cortisol inhibitor, an actual compound that blocks the conversion? And I found one, which is what we use in QuarterBlock, and it works really well. The data is like 46%, up to 46% blocks the conversion. So that's pretty high.
That's huge.
Yeah, that is massive.
Right. So, and it's a noticeable, if you take the product, so unfortunately, I have to say this, the active has it's also a natural laxative. So when you first take it, you can have some gastric issues for a few days. It happened to me for the first 4 or 5 days. And your body adjusts to this stuff for the most part. If it doesn't adjust, then obviously stop taking the product. And I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to block that. Like
there's other products that exist on the market that have that same effect, right? You know, like even if we look at something as simple as BHB salts, same sort of thing. You know, if you're when you first start taking them, laxative effect big time. Once you get used to them, it's fine, right? So I think people tend to know that. And
is that due to zonulin? Like, what's the link between something that'll prevent? Because the only thing I can think of with like the link between gastric distress and cortisol being the protein zonulin and its sort of inflammatory effect in the gut. Is that the relationship between why something that inhibits cortisol also causes digestive distress?
I just think it's a natural part of the molecule. Like, molecules can have different effects. This plant, one of its uses is a laxative. So it's a property of the molecule. I don't think it has anything to do with the actual inhibition of cortisol. I think it's just a natural. What I did, the best thing I can do is we started off at 2 500 milligram caps a day. We broke it down into 4 250. We made them XR caps, so they release inside your gut instead of right in your throat right away. But it's just still an issue that I'm trying to figure out and work on. But the data for the compound is really good as far as not just inhibiting cortisol, but also working to increase insulin sensitivity as well by a lot. So I think that the compound has a lot of positive effects. And for me, the gastric issues stopped within a few days.
Interesting.
But I always look for, can you stop the problem before it happens versus we have this problem, how do we put a Band-Aid on it, essentially?
So prevention is better than cure, right?
Yes, stop the problem before it happens. So to answer the initial question, that's why I was trying to look for an inhibitor versus things like phosphatidylserine that have data that show it decreases overall cortisol, but it's not through blocking the conversion. It's a different mechanism.
Yeah, gotcha. Because once it's there, you've still got the effects. You're just mitigating them, and a lot of them, like ashwagandha, is a beautiful herb. It's become big in that space, and it's got some other perks, being GABAergic and so on. And I think what I've found quite profound recently is when you're I've been looking at antidepressants a lot, and sort of that sort of mechanism, and a lot of the research behind in the nootropic space also comes into sort of behavioral psych. And I often wonder, like you alluded to before, how much you could actually ameliorate in terms of people's felt anxiety or perceived anxiety and struggles with mental health and so on, down to a chemical point. Like I often wonder if you've got someone with, a functional dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, like, would there still be the same, same perceived mental struggles? And would that have, that's where I see it going, nootropics more so. As like that's a massive space that people unfortunately they're playing with one isolated part of the chemical equation. Unfortunately, they're just stop the breakdown of serotonin for a long period. They're not, it's a very farmer way of looking at it. Hey, like block one specific thing, do one, but people, because I get asked this question in a retail setting quite often. I had it last week with a customer, and I was being asked that sort of thing, like, oh, I'm on antidepressants. Will this adrenal support product, interact negatively, or will this be a problem? And I'm like, well, sorry, dear, but this is probably where we should have started instead of going to, but it's obviously probably a bit of a controversial opinion to have, and there are definitely, necessities around those sort of drugs at certain times. But I often wonder if you can address the biochem, and we're blessed now to have compounds that can do so, with what we play with every day. I do wonder what sort of implication that would have in Gen Pop for mental health and so on. I link so many people are stressed now. Cortisol is so rampant in general population with busy lifestyles, with the amount of with environmental burden as well. I think they're and seeing cortisol's effects on dopamine, seeing its effects on serotonin, and you go, well, no wonder why everyone's depressed. That's where I go to it.
Well, you got to be careful. You got to be careful, Will. Don't start talking too loudly about these compounds replacing pharmaceuticals, or the FDA will be on us like a rash, mate.
Well, if we're big enough to be noticed by them, I'll take that as a compliment.
Hey, mate, this podcast is going places. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Brian, can I ask you? I wanted to I've just been sort of here thinking in my head a little bit. We talked a little bit about some of the products or some of the compounds that are currently used on the market that you believe are almost a waste of time. I'd like to hear your hit list. Obviously, beta-alanine's on there. Can you give me, say, like your top, say, four compounds that are commonly used that are thought of as a must-have that really are a waste of time and shouldn't be in products, and the reasons for?
L-Carnitine as a fat burner.
It
doesn't work. It doesn't increase lipolysis, regardless that your body needs L-Carnitine to shuttle fatty acids into your mitochondrial matrix to get burned. That's not how the supplement works. It doesn't, even an injectable L-Carnitine really doesn't work. It doesn't work without insulin, carbs. So L-Carnitine works well if you have it with carbohydrates. It'll get into your system. I made a post about that too.
Yeah, you did.
Or if you use this very, very small bit of like exogenous insulin, it will help with the uptake. But if you're just taking, 2-3 grams of L-Carnitine to try and burn fat, it's not going to do shit. I think GBB is this new one that I fucking hate, excuse my language, because there's zero research on this compound that shows anything about fat loss. Supposedly converts into L-Carnitine. If you read the papers, they're from the 60s, and they don't really say anything about fat loss, and they don't give a mechanism of why you sweat your ass off. So people use this thing that I have personally never tested in an NMR or a GCMS or anything like that to see what it really is. And all it does is make you sweat. And so people use it in their products because it's experiential, highly experiential. It actually makes you sweat.
Extreme salivation. I don't know if you guys have noticed that.
It dehydrates you a lot. So quick story. When this is 2017, I got a sample. I asked for a sample of this stuff to see how it works. And I didn't convert from the paper, which is in like rats or mice, to the human dose. It was off by like a factor of 10 or something.
Cool.
And when I took the dose, I took so much that I actually had to get IV fluids put back because I was dehydrated so much. I went through, like, literally looked like I jumped in a pool, and I took 2 shirts off and I was still sweating. And then it got to the point where you get the shakes and your vision starts going because you're so dehydrated. Your kidneys are now not functioning well. And so I wound up having to get an IV of like saline fluid in my arm because of this stupid GBB that doesn't really do anything except dehydrate you.
Like good diuretic. They're not much of a fat burner. I remember your post on this with L-Carnitine, and I think this is something that would probably, before we let you complete your list of 4 on the hit list, because that's very valuable. But I think the carnitine one, when you first put that study out, and I found in the presence of insulin, one that seems counterintuitive when you look at anything that's going to activate AMPK, insulin is not that. So it's like you've got a very interesting dichotomy there where you've got something that promotes mTOR and goes down, insulin versus a lipolysis pathway is opposites really in many people's minds.
They're antagonistic.
They are, aren't they? Exactly right. Insulin will blunt lipolysis almost entirely. So when you look at something like that as a delivery mechanism required for oral L-Carnitine, that's a very interesting point that I remember that post about it. So in the actual, and I also remember you're probably one of the people who share, I think much like our guest just the other week, James, because as well, you probably got opinions that the other guys don't always see as the most popular ones. But I think a few years later they do some reading and then it comes out that, oh shit, what he said in 2007 was cool. With I guess in the absence of something that's going to drive lipolysis, I always went the opposite way. When I started playing, I guess similar how you went the step back to cortisol, just stopping the conversion. I sort of looked at thyroid more so. I went down like cyclic AMP sort of pathway and try and do it from a cellular signaling way rather than try and increase serum carnitine and so on. But if you were to put together a fat burner, quote unquote, I guess given your disillusion with the current ingredients available, what would you use?
Get your pen out, Will, because this is going to be your next product that you're going to release.
I'm just intrigued to see what you'll use.
Well, I mean, alpha yohimbine works really well. You guys can't use it in Australia, right?
No, it's not
but
safe.
I think there's good data for that. There's a new compound that is dihydro capsaicinoate. Have you guys heard of that one yet?
Oh, that's a Capsimax that's been played with. Hey,
no, it's not compound. That's not Capsimax. It's a different trademark. I forgot the name. It's newer. It's called dihydro capsaicinoate. And there's really good data on it for legitimately burning fat through the same pathway as Capsimax. It's just a stronger compound. I think that the green tea works well as like something that burns fat systemically. There aren't really a whole lot of options of things that are out there that truly burn fat. Most fat burners are a bunch of stimulants, right?
Yeah.
Because you feel like it's working.
So I think what people are generally looking for is something that we can draw a direct link between consumption and then fat burning straight up. But really, it's a complex process. So yeah, if we can stimulate the central nervous system, sure, we can burn some more calories at rest. And I think that's probably still our most effective method of burning fat, right? Our heavy stimulants.
I haven't seen anything that trumps ephedrine and caffeine that I think increases your basal by almost 8%.
Whoa.
So that's a lot,
Whoa.
to increase. If you do it the 3 times a day, like the old ECA stacks, I believe the study was 8%. If you take 20 milligrams of ephedrine and 200 of caffeine.
Yeah.
So I don't think anything has come close to that as far as literally burning fat. But that Cortisol product that I have burns a lot of fat via not storing it from cortisol. So it's kind of a back-ended way to burn fat. Like we consider it a non-stim fat burner because that's what it's ultimately used for. It also works well to sleep and lower your anxiety and stress, but I put it in the fat marker or the fat burner space because ultimately that's what it does when you decrease your cortisol by that much.
That's an interesting space too, because I think the the best game. I got some weird looks when I started putting withania in some of my early fat burners and not having much stimulant at all and stuff. Like people did, this was 2 years ago, and people did give me weird looks like, why are you caring about cortisol with this game? It's, like it's not the right thing. It's just got top of it there. But I found it really interesting that with quarter block, you said as a fat burner, and I saw when you did that study with you did that controlled study with the guinea pig athlete there, and he lost like an obscene. His body composition improved massively, and I'd love normal people to be able to experience that, because I think we're all, my opinion of like that's the thermogenics, the high stimulant fat burners, is that people's cortisol is already off the charts. Dump extra stim on top and just watch it stall. Like anyone who's been in comp, we've all been in comp prep, or heavy diets, and you can just watch you're watching the grams go off each week. And as soon as you take the stress off and have a deload week, it just melts. And I guess I want to pick your brain on the mechanism of that, because you've got something like I guess I'll put it down to sort of gluconeogenesis is as the main cause that you've constantly got elevated blood sugar, and I guess the reason you've found that's probably why it increases insulin sensitivity as well. You said quarter block does. That makes sense, I guess. Mm-hmm. If you lower cortisol, you'll stop constantly liberating blood sugar. So I guess what's your mechanisms behind that for actually driving the fat loss? Like specifically, what's the pathways when you have lower cortisol? Is it just a state of you've got a lower insulin state, and therefore it can is just literally being a parasympathetic state is much better for lipolysis? Or
I think that cortisol has a direct relationship with insulin, which is a storage hormone, right? And if your insulin levels are out of control and they're not stabilized, that your body is going to tend to use them towards fat. Also, low cortisol, like if you have a small amount of cortisol, you need that, especially in the morning to wake up and stuff, because that's what triggers your body to break down fat to begin with. So if you lower smaller bits of cortisol, I think are more beneficial, because that's what your whole fight or flight system is, right? Yeah. It just cortisol causes lipolysis and increases norepinephrine, gets your whole system ready, and that's when you're running on like adrenaline and actually burning fat. If they're too high, it kind of stops that whole process from happening, and I think allows insulin to take over as the key regulator of, we're not in a position to release fats as energy, because we are storing them so that we'll have energy for the long haul, something like that. So I think the mechanism, you're right, is more closely related to insulin, and then the higher your cortisol is, the less of the fight or flight mechanism you're actually getting, which is what does release fat loss.
Yeah, but and that's the same way that I explain it to customers when I'm selling anti-cortisol products as fat burners, is more so the fact that when cortisol is elevated or at a rate that's far too high, it's forming this roadblock for fat loss, right? So it's like, if we can lower the cortisol, we take the roadblock away. And that's really more what we're talking about, rather than an active, and a direct.
I don't think it's a direct, like you said, it's not directly mobilizing fat. It's more indirect. I agree with what you're saying.
Take the roadblock away, and therefore fat burning becomes much easier. Now, something I wanted to ask you about, this is for my own personal interest's sake. I want to talk about artificial sweeteners and like what we would call diet soft drink or diet soda.
We call them that
too. Do I have cancer from drinking it, or is that a fallacy?
Do I think that you get cancer from them? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Are we all going to die of cancer from drinking our Diet Coke?
Yeah, sucraloses and all that sort of jazz, and phenylalanines and everything.
I think that most of them are bad for you, and I don't think it's directly going to be a causing cancer thing, but I think it's wrecking your gut microbiome thing. There's tons of studies that show how those things affect your gut, right? So I think that the problem is, while saccharin was like the initial one that was shown to cause cancer in rats, I think that sucralose, which is 600 times sweeter, so you only really get a small amount in your body, at a time. I think the problem is it wrecks your microbiome. And once you mess with your gut, that has such a like deleterious effects on like your whole body, right? I think that's going to be the downfall. I mean, it's some of them do have shown to be directly cause cancer. I don't know if sucralose is going to fall that way as far as directly linked to it. I think there are some studies out that show there is a correlation, but I personally am not a fan of them. The only time I ever drink anything that's artificially flavored is if it's a pre-workout or something. That's like
what,
ever.
So what do you lean towards for sweeteners? Do you just prefer sugar?
Honestly, the only thing I ever drink is water. So I don't drink any of the sodas and stuff. I don't like them. I used to. They're just, a lot of them are very acidic and they don't sit well with me. So I think if you're going to use sugar, just use sugar. Just a little bit though. I mean, people often overstate, and I'm one of them who looks like into the very, 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 very tiny space. But at the end of the day, if you're just a normal person who is counting macros and stuff, that little bit of sugar, especially if it's something before you work out or before you do something active, I don't think it's going to have a crazy effect on your body composition or anything. Like in the intra workout where you want carbs, I used straight glucose, dextrose, and then the D-ribose and the cluster dextrin. So there was no, I think that's the time when you want straight carbs. I think glucose goes right into your system right away. So I don't have an issue with it. I don't drink soda though, so it might be the wrong person to ask. What about
when we're talking about formulating flavored products? Where do you stand on sweeteners for supplements? Like how would you look at, how would you tackle that for making product? How do you tackle that for your products?
So one of the major problems with stuff like stevia is that not only is it very expensive, but you need a lot of it to work. And so I initially tried to make the pre-workout naturally flavored, nothing artificial, just stevia and monk fruit and stuff like that, right? But there's so much dirt and mushrooms and stuff in there that it just is so hard. It was too hard to naturally flavor. It tasted so bad, even with large amounts.
Yeah.
Because if you take a full serving, there's 1,000 milligrams of Kana, there's 600 milligrams of liamine, there's 2,000 milligrams of mushrooms via Pico 2, there's 300 milligrams of rhodiola. So right there is 5 things that all taste like shit. That's in large amounts too. So
and at some point you don't want to waste the space with sweetener, right? You're like, well, I don't want to put in all these grams of sweetener because there's so many cool compounds I could be putting in that space.
I mean, for price wise too, if I'm trying to, like I said, stevia and monk fruit are expensive, and the amount you have to use to cover up something like that is a lot. So I would love to use them more in like simpler products. I think I'm trending a lot more into capsules at the moment because I can eliminate that altogether. But you're always going to have, your pre-workouts or your pump products or something like that has to be a powder. And I would love to do a naturally flavored one. I think Myoblocks did a great job with Isofrac. Their protein is all naturally flavored with stevia and monk fruit, and I think it's one of the best tasting ones they have, or that's out in the market. And so I think there's ways to do it. Me personally, I try to use as little. I don't like using those things. I don't use any dyes and stuff, but I try not to use the artificial flavors as least as possible. But sometimes you can't get around it. And I think this very, very small amounts that people are ingesting from that are not as deleterious as if you're taking it every single day and like through the packets of things like Splenda packets. Each one of those things has like a gram of pure maltodextrin. I mean, that's worse. Like having just all that, because you're taking in all of this like filler essentially to get this tiny little bit, which is really all you need.
That's an interesting one. Actually, I know this might open a rabbit hole up, but when you mentioned impact on microbiome, now gut.
I forgot this was the 8-hour podcast I agreed to do.
So yeah, actually, look, we might actually make that a part two because I am actually about to mention the gut part because there's with microbiome impacts of things like stevia is actually like a polyphenol as well. It's actually favourable for microbiome. I use it in my protein. It's quite easy in a way to flavour. I found just because you've got a 30-gram serving size, you can quite happily put put a few grams in there as a sweetener and it works fine. But I find that's an interesting space, the gut health space. I wonder if we can expect to see anything similar in your space, or if you think it's too much. Sorry, Stu.
Oh, sorry, you just cut out on my end there for a second. So I thought we'd lost audio on you, but I think we're definitely going to have to get the Guerrilla Chemist on for a part two because, like you said, this could easily turn into a 3-hour podcast if we weren't careful.
Yeah, gotcha, definitely, mate. And
I don't care. So to me, I'm one of those people that geek out. So I don't mind doing this stuff. Today, you know who Uber Jack is? The DJ?
Hey.
I'm not familiar.
Ben? Yeah, so Uber agreed to do my podcast. So we're going to record later today. He's in Adelaide, which is pretty cool. So I have to do one later with him. Otherwise, I'd sit here for hours and geek out. So, I'm obviously, we'll come back on the show and do whatever you need because anytime we can get out real information with people that will spread real information, it's a positive thing to me.
Definitely. Well, thank you for giving us so much for the real information because it's hard to find. There's always a quite a thick veil of marketing in front of a lot of the actual science, unfortunately. So
what did James? Did you talk to that about James? I have to listen to the episode because James and I were partners with Chemex, and James and I had worked at Blackstone, lived together. We have a long history.
Oh, he was a legend to talk to, mate. He was fantastic, and he spoke very highly of yourself.
James was the one who, I guess, put it out there that you are the best formulator on the planet. So, that might be the tagline beside your name now. And, hey, I've spoken to a lot of people in this industry. I've been around since 2009. And to be honest, I don't think he's too far from the truth from what he said. So that's pretty cool to have beside your name, the best formulator on the planet.
He was also really the founder of the no snitches prop blend idea, and I think it's really funny for people who are all about that was a really interesting opinion to have, the prop blend idea. I can actually see when you're working on compounds like yourself, Brian, and you're developing things that are actually revolutionary, no one's seen before. I can see why you actually would want to have some of those things disclosed because you go through a lot of work to bring them to market. And you don't want to just copy it. And it was an interesting space. I hadn't seen that opinion before. So
James convinced me because I was all about transparency, and when I got to Blackstone, we did that. Changed all the labels to pretty much transparent stuff. But this was way before Amazon was this gigantic retailer that will just copy everything that anybody does, make their own, and sell it for less. So James put that out there, and as much as I hate actually not having a prop blend and not having it disclosed, that prop blend probably took me 4 or 5 months to get where I wanted it, as far as changing things by 5 and 10 milligrams, so we're not talking about just adding one thing or two things or taking something away. It was a very meticulous process to get what I wanted. And I do believe that the combination of the big ingredients that people look for in the doses, like Pico-2 or in beta-alanine, if they're looking for that or whatever, that you should disclose, not in a prop blend. So that's why I did the lion's mane is disclosed at 600 mgs. The Pico-2 is disclosed at 200 mgs. The Kana is disclosed at 1,000 because that's a big difference from anyone at the time who was using it. So James is the one that convinced me that you should protect what you're doing because someone else is just going to do it cheaper at some point.
Yeah. And that really is unheard of here. And that kind of opinion that James put across on our podcast actually changed my entire thought process on it. All of the products I've ever done have been full disclosure panels. And I'm actually working on a project now, which is an industry mark called Prop Blend and Proud. And it's a mark that you'll put on your product where you send your formula to Prop Blend and Proud. We say, yes, it's effective. It's dosed effectively, but we're not going to tell you what it is. So the consumers can still look at it and go, it's a prop blend. It's effectively dosed. It carries this mark to protect itself. So I'm trying to kind of coin the term formulation piracy to really make it a disgusting and despicable thing when people steal formulations. So I'm working on that, and I'm actually going to try and
I'll help promote that for sure. I think there's too many. It's weird. James had such a strong argument because I think you and I we're viewing it the same way, but it's very old school. It's very new school, because old school was prop blend. Then the new school was like, no, we want to show you that we're actually using stuff, and compared to things like rhymes with E4 and where they only like dust stuff in there. And so you have a prop blend of 2.5 grams where like 2 grams of it is, beta alanine and then whatever. So I agree with the thought of, we want to have as much as it released to the consumer. The consumers are smarter now. With then you can Google anything and get information. You can go on Google Scholar and get a paper on anything. People have that information in front of them. And then there's platforms like yours and mine that put out this information for free. So it's there. So I think that that's a pretty cool idea of putting a sticker on that says prop blend and proud, meaning that
let's team up on it. Let's work together on it. I'll contact you in the next couple of weeks, and let's get in on the project together. I'm talking to started talking to James about it. But let's do it. Let's make it a thing. Let's make an industry mark called Prop Blend and Proud, so that people can actually promote the fact that we're a prop blend, and we're proud to say it. You're not going to use this to discredit my company. The fact that I'm using a prop blend, you can't discredit me. I'm putting it out there, and I'm telling you I'm a prop blend for a reason, and I'm still effectively dosed.
Yeah, 100%. Because if you look, if you've looked at any product I've ever done, nothing's ever been underdosed. So there's no reason I would do that now. You know what I mean? I've never put out something that I thought was underdosed because I won't put my name on it if I think it's shitty. So everything that I do, no matter, like I told you, it's in the prop blend, but there's 300 milligrams of rhodiola. That's 3%, 2%. So it's not on the label how much is in there, but that's a good amount of rhodiola. That's a standard dose. Like I can go down the list of everything in there and tell you what it is, because I trust that what I'm putting out is good. And so I don't skimp on stuff. The people that use the prop blends in the past are the ones that, like I said, they used to skimp on it and rely on the fillers almost to bump up the ingredients, and then use a tiny little bit of something active to feel it, like some niacin or something, so that your face flows up.
Gold flush.
Yeah, exactly. And those people who
I
are
love
using
that
a prop
idea.
blend to hide the fact that they're underdosing won't be able to use the industry mark. So on that note, I think I could talk about this all day. So we better wrap up and say goodbye, so that you can get onto your next podcast. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We definitely will need to get you on for an episode 2, though. But thanks so much for giving us your time there, Brian.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, make sure that you guys thank Pat and Maddie over at Spartan, because they're the ones that hit me up, said you got to talk to these guys, which I really appreciate, because anything Pat and Matt do, I trust them 100%. They're such good people.
They're amazing, man. And Matt was what the idea man behind this. We actually started this podcast to lobby to give a voice to the supplement industry in Australia, because the TGA were trying to pretty much shut us down.
I read about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it all started. Matt, Stu, and myself, and Matt. Matt's been brilliant at reaching out to people like yourself and James to really help us, reach a broader audience with like you said, put the real information out there, and it's been amazing. So thanks for giving us nearly 2 hours of your time, Brian. I know it's valuable. So with that, we'll wrap up episode 8 of the Wot Supp podcast. Thanks for listening.
Episode 9, Will. Episode 9.
Episode 9 now. Wow, we're really hooking through.
That's the third one.
We're at episode 9.
See you later, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Pleasure.
Pleasure.
See you, Brian.